Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Elle and I'm going to be talking today about world building. For those who don't know, world building is what you use to make your fictional world believable. It's using fictional elements like your magic system, your cities, your travel, your creatures, anything, but putting them into your story in a way that makes it seem just as believable as the real world we're living in now. I did study architecture for 5 years and I definitely think that has helped me in my world building. Architecture isn't just about making a pretty building, it's about how people use that building, same as world building. You can't just create a city, you have to think about how people live in that city, how they go about their day, what their religion is, what their culture is, everything related to that city. It can get pretty complex and not all of it needs to go into your writing, which is one of the things I'll be talking about today. You can create as many fantastical worlds as you want, but unless you know how to integrate that into your writing, it might not come across as authentic as you want it to. Today I've got 10 tips for you on writing world building. The first thing I want to discuss is not to forget the small details. This might seem like a really minor one, but sometimes describing things in close detail does help the world building. You might think, oh, but then it's going to go on forever, but you don't describe everything. It's not like writing a whole page descriptive about a new scene, but picking out the small details in that scene that will be important. Small things that maybe the character notices, maybe no one else does, but draw attention to the things that are important to your world building. For example, if a city is made of bricks and the character's walking along the street and there's a specific house that they're looking for, what makes that house different to all the other houses? If there are scratch marks on a door, that's an imperfection, and that means that the reader is going to wonder why there are scratch marks on the door. Who put them there? How did they get there? Are they keeping something in? Did something try to get in the door? Are they keeping something out? Did the character put those marks there? Are they to signal that that door is different to any other door? What is different about that door? There are endless questions about just the tiniest little detail. Small details, imperfections, and that leads me on to the second point, which is to include what grabs the reader's attention. If there are small details that grab the reader's attention, that's good, include them, because then you get to know what they focus on. You can tell a lot about what someone notices in a scene. If a character's at a ball and they're not focusing on the people, but maybe they're just focusing on a door or a window and they want to escape, it's kind of letting you know that they don't like social settings. Or if they're the opposite, if they're focusing on people and they love talking to people, you're going to notice that about them. This is especially important in first-person narratives when you're inside the character's head, so then you want to know exactly what they're focusing on. What the character doesn't notice can be just as important as what they do notice. If you have a third-person narrative and the narrator is picking up on something that the character is not, that could signal to the reader that it's quite important. The same goes the other way as well. So if there are details that just aren't important, don't include them, because then you will be going on and on and on in description. That will lose your reader's attention if you're describing everything. Just describe what's important. The third point I've got is to be aware of what mood you're creating. A lot of world building comes down to atmosphere and how a character is experiencing the world. The details you choose to include or omit can change the mood of a setting. So if you want the scene to appear happy, then you focus on describing the happy details. And if you want a scene to appear quite dark, then you focus on the foreboding elements. It's good when the mood of a scene is related to the character's emotions. Senses especially make a big difference. What the character sees, hears, feels, smells, and tastes. The fourth tip is to mention people, places, and objects in relation to each other. When you refer to one thing, refer to another as well, because that can highlight the relationship between those two things. You can say the dog sat at the top of the stairs, which seems like such a minor thing, but then you know that there are stairs, and then you know that they're inside, or not necessarily inside. If the reader knows that the hog's head is in Hogsmeade, They already know what Hogsmeade looks like, so they can kind of make their own assumptions about what the Hog's Head looks like. If you refer to someone as someone's murderer, they're automatically going to have a bad perception of the murderer and maybe possibly victimize the other person. Depends what you're wanting to achieve and how you convey it through your writing. I mean, if you say Bellatrix is Dobby's murderer, then you automatically know Bellatrix is probably not such a friendly person. And closely relating to that point is that you should name places and objects and people descriptively. This has been done so many times, especially in fairy tales. But if you name things descriptively, then you don't need to describe what they look like as much. The Mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings are obviously mines. The Forbidden Forest in Harry Potter is forbidden. And the glass slipper that Cinderella wears is made of glass. They're all descriptive titles, but they give away what the object is, what the place is, whether they're allowed there or not. Some other ones are an invisibility cloak is an invisible cloak. Sleeping Beauty is a sleeping beauty. Prince Charming, a charming prince. The Sea Witch, a witch who lives in the sea. There's the Little Mermaid, a mermaid who's little. Snow White, snow that is white. A main one is probably the Seven Dwarves. I don't remember all their names, but like happy is happy, sleepy is sleepy, grumpy is grumpy. I should probably remember more than 3. Dopey is dopey. Yeah, I can't remember. But those names are super descriptive, so you know immediately the personality of that character. If you can think of other ones, please leave a comment because there are so many. I'm sure Lord of the Rings has way more. I'm sure Harry Potter has way more, and fairy tales, of course, there are so many more fairy tales that will have lots of descriptive names. Okay, so my 6th point is to do with maps. I love seeing maps in stories and being able to flip back to the start of the book to see where they're going, all the places. But one thing to remember is that the characters usually just have a limited time that they can do something, or the book has a limited amount of pages, so you can't always visit every place on the map. And if you do, you don't get the time to make that place seem realistic. If you're writing a 70,000 word novel and your characters are visiting 20 completely different locations, it's probably unlikely you're going to be able to give each of those locations the necessary amount of exposition to keep the reader immersed in the setting. The reason why fantasy and science fiction novels are normally longer than contemporaries is the world building. There's a lot more stuff that you need to describe. So the 7th point is to have places reoccur, because to make them seem more realistic, you can go back to the same places or just refer to them before they get there or after they go. You're kind of reinforcing that that place exists and that the characters know of it, they're still thinking of it. It gives more structure and realism to the world because places don't just suddenly appear and then disappear once you've left. If a place did do this, then the character's probably going to wonder why, or still remember it, or if it's gone from their memory, then maybe there's a reason for that. Or if the characters stumble across a new city out of nowhere, probably going to wonder why that city suddenly appeared. Was it on their map? Maybe it wasn't, and then they're going to be curious about the reason for that city being there. How long has it been there? Is there a spell over the city? There are so many reasons you could have a city appear and disappear. So my 8th tip is an important one, and that is to remember the rules of your world. You can't just create a magic system and then forget that that magic system has limits. The reader needs to be able to assume the character's abilities, assume what they're capable of. Like if the character's fighting and suddenly their power just doubles and that's why they win, why did their power double? You want the reader to be able to follow along as well and kind of make their own assumptions about the battle. Who's gonna win? Who do they think has the most power? And if you change that suddenly, it kind of throws them off a bit. Might throw them out of the world building a little bit, so it just doesn't seem as authentic and real. Rules are rules. And if you can't abide by your own rules, how can you expect the reader to? My 9th point is that you need to use exposition in the right moments. I like reading about descriptive cities, but you need to pick the right moments when to include these descriptions and include these paragraphs of, maybe not paragraphs, but these descriptions of places or people or objects. If a character has just arrived somewhere, the reader wants to know where they've arrived. So that's a good opportunity to add in some detail. Let them know what's going on, describe it. This is a part where descriptive text can actually be used to heighten suspense or create mood in a scene. Don't info dump, but if you need to be descriptive, be aware of when you're being descriptive. So my 10th tip is to trust your audience. It's hard to measure this one because you don't want to get too little detail and you don't want to get too much detail, but readers are quite smart and you need to be aware of how much they're probably just absorbing through the way you're writing and what your character's experiencing. So don't over-describe, but don't under-describe either, because then they won't get a sense of the world. In terms of trusting your audience, it can be really good to have someone read over your work, I think, because it's really hard for you to tell if you're too close to the story. Yeah, get someone with an objective eye, have them read over your story a bit and see what they think. If you're describing too much, that it's pulling them out of the story, or if you're describing too little that they can't get into the story. I found that that can be really helpful. The way you write is really important. As I've said in all the previous points, what you include, what you omit, how you name things, where you travel, how you describe things makes a big difference to the authenticity of your world building. World building is super important, so just don't forget to do that, especially if it's a fantasy or science fiction novel. World building is such an exciting part of creating a novel that I hope you are able to apply these tips to your writing. Comment and let me know. I have got a blog post about this, so if you want to go read 10 tips for writing world building, I'll leave the link so you can go visit my blog. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in my next video.